Hi everyone and welcome back to my channel. For those who are new here, my name is Nicki. I'm an author and editor and I post videos here on YouTube about reading, writing, editing and all the other things I love. Now it's the end of the month. I know it's come around quick again, but it's time to tell you about some of the books I've been reading during May. I've got about 14 books for you today, so without any further ado, we'll kick off. So the first book is actually one that I finished at the end of April, but just a day too late to fit into my last video. It's called Bones and Bourbon and it's by Dorian. This is an LGBT title. I received it from NetGalley, this one, so I was reading it as an ebook. I gave it 4 stars. Now it's essentially a paranormal fantasy kind of tale. You have 2 brothers, Rhett and Jared, and Jared has his own supernatural problems going on, but his main focus is Rhett, his younger brother, who has been possessed in order to save his life. It was a deal his father, or their father, made to save Rhett's life, but it put a spirit called Nalem. I'm calling him Nalem. I'm not sure on the pronunciation whether it should be Nalem, Nalem, but in my head it's Nalem. This is the spirit of a guy and he can control bones. So, you know, he could rip your skeleton out of you and also sort of make you move, like, without your consent kind of thing. He's kind of a bit of a bad guy, but he's actually my favourite character. I love this guy. Rhett is fine, but it was Nalem who really interested me all the way through. It was a really intriguing concept. I do feel once or twice it got a little bit bogged down. I think if I've been editing it, I probably would have wanted to just trim a few bits here and there just to keep the pace going, because there was just a few moments when there was just so much need for exposition and that going on, it kind of slowed down the action. But that's a minor complaint. As I said, it's still a 4-star read for me because it was a fascinating concept. I liked the characters and I would certainly be interested in reading on and finding out more about them and what's going to happen to them from where we left off at the end of this first story. The next book I read, also from NetGalley, was The Unofficial Guide to Ancestry.com by Nancy Hendrickson. This is a 4.5-star read for me. I've been using Ancestry for just over a year now to do my family history research. This book I thought was very informative, well laid out. It's probably of most use if you're coming to it completely new, like you're about to start Ancestry for the first time. I mean, I did find a lot of the stuff in it is stuff that I've worked out for myself over the course of the 12-14 months I've been using it. But for a newcomer, definitely really useful, and even for someone like me who has been using it, there were a few tips and tricks that I picked up from the book. So a very informative read if you're into genealogy and want to conduct your family history research on Ancestry. The third book I read is one I read in paperback. It's one that I got myself for Christmas. I say got myself for Christmas because I was actually given some money by my in-laws and it's just one of the ones I chose to buy with that. And it's Revolution, which is part 4 of the History of England by Peter Ackroyd. I've read the first 3 in the season, loved them. This one's no exception. It's a 5-star read for me. I really love Ackroyd's easygoing prose. He packs a lot of detail in and he gets that research and that need for details and verification over, but he does it in a really brilliant storytelling kind of way. I enjoy all his history books and I'm really excited for the next one, which of course will take us, Revolution took us through Georgian England, so we've still got 2 more books to come in the series, which I assume are going to be Victorian England and then Edwardian and through the 20th century, so lots to look forward to there. And the next one I read is another book that again is one that I've bought with gift money, and that is Clarissa by Richardson. I've been wanting to read Clarissa for a long time. It's a story that's always appealed to me, and I do like the TV adaptation with Sean Bean from the early 90s, and I absolutely adored it. This is another 5-star read for me. In fact, it's yeah, there were 3 5-star reads this month, so this was the second one. Lovelace is such an amazing character. I know technically he's the bad guy, but you can't help but be a bit attracted to him in the way Clarissa is. And Clarissa, interestingly, you know, she's the heroine and she's the one who's been seduced away from her family by a rake, by Lovelace. But in some ways she's the the cause of her own downfall. I can't be entirely compassionate towards her because she makes some very poor choices, and when she's has an opportunity, or several opportunities to rectify them, she doesn't take it. So I think Lovelace, yes, he is a rogue, but I think even more in the book than in the TV series. In the TV series they really played up the sort of evil, if you like, I don't like using that word, but the evil side of his character. Whereas in the book you get a bit more of a balanced view of him through the letters he writes to his friend. And he does waver along the way. He's not always set on this bad path. He contemplates doing good things, and then between him talking himself out of it, and between Clarissa not taking him up on those offers when he puts them out there, that's what causes all the drama. But it's an epistolary novel from the 18th century, so it's quite heavy-going prose, but really worth it. It's really wonderful read. I actually ended up with an abridged version, which was by mistake. It's still 500 odd pages, but the whole thing is actually usually about 1500. So I do eventually want to grab hold of a copy of the full text to read it again. And next up, back to NetGalley for Influencer by Brittany Hennessy. And this is a 4-star read for me, and it's a book looking at how do you become an influencer. So you see all these people on Instagram and Twitter and the like who get to trial products for companies and get a lot of free merchandise and various things, and they basically do that because they're influencers. They've got a lot of followers, they've got a lot of dedicated followers. It's not necessarily just numbers, but it's to do with interactions and things as well. And it's sort of looking at how do you set yourself up to be an influencer. For me, I was looking at this more in terms of helping me as a promotional tool to advertise my editing, advertise my books and things like that on social media. And I definitely picked up a few tips. However, it's probably more of use if you are looking to really go into being an influencer and getting brand deals for things like makeup, clothing, fashion, more than what I was reading it for. Even so, it was a 4-star read for me, and definitely if you're interested in making a splash on social media, it's one you'll want to check out. Next up is another NetGalley read, and it is What Kitty Did Next by Carrie Kablean. 4-star read for me. Now this story is a continuation of Pride and Prejudice, but told from the viewpoint of Kitty, Elizabeth Bennet's younger sister. I went to this with mixed expectations. The trouble is with these kind of retellings and extensions of older stories that sometimes you don't know quite what you're going to get. Some are really great, some are really awful. And this was one of the good ones. 4-star read for me. It was great fun. I enjoyed the plot. I enjoyed the representation of Kitty, and I did feel that all the other characters like Darcy and Elizabeth and the like were all pretty well in character, as they were in the Jane Austen. So that was a plus for me, and if you're into historical fiction, if you're a Jane Austen fan, it's definitely one to check out. Next up, another NetGalley run, To Kill a Sorcerer, and this is by Greg Mongrain, and it's a 4-star read again for me. This is a paranormal thriller, I guess you'd call it. Sebastian Monroe is immortal. He's a businessman, entrepreneur, if you like, but he also gets involved in crime investigation when he feels like it, because he's got the money to persuade the department to let him get involved. And a series of supernaturally linked killings start taking place, and he joins up with a cop to help solve them. I thought it was really nicely paced. There is a romance for Sebastian during the course of it with a vampire called Alina, which I liked, but I was really pleased it didn't take over the story, and almost as important was his buddy relationship that began to grow between him and the cop with whom he was working. Certainly it's going to be the first of a series, and I would certainly read more of these and see him solving some more crimes and mysteries in the future, because I liked the character and it was a nice, well-written piece. And it's yet another NetGalley read next. This is Louis XIV, The Real Sun King by Aurora von Goeth and Jules Harper. Another 4-star read for me. This is quite a succinct biography. It was only a couple of 100 pages, roughly just taking you through his life, highlighting some of the key events, the key people. As such, I thought it was a very good introductory biography. Probably if you really want to get into who Louis was, you'd need something a little bit bigger, a little bit more in-depth. But if you're just new, perhaps you've been watching Versailles, you want to know more about the real Louis XIV, this is probably a really good text to start with, and then you can move on to some bigger, more comprehensive biographies later. And next up, another NetGalley, and Claimed by the Gods by Ava Chase. Now this is a reverse harem story. Ari is a sort of street smart young woman trying to do her best by her little brother. One day she's tragically killed in an accident. However, she doesn't die, not completely. She's brought back to life as a Valkyrie by the Norse gods. Essentially Loki, Thor, Hod, and oh my goodness, Freya's there, Balder. Nearly had a little like mental blank then. And they've brought her back as a Valkyrie because they've got a problem. Odin's missing, and without him they can't get back to Asgard. So along the way they encounter some foes such as dark elves, and overall I really enjoyed the story. It is going to be, as I said, a reverse harem. It's the first in a series. That romantic side of things is a fairly slow burn in this first book. She does start to show an interest in different gods, principally Loki to begin with. But I thought it was a really nicely paced piece. There was plenty of action. I generally liked the mythology. There was a little bit of a Marvel hint now and again. Like, I mean, she talks about Loki as a frost giant, which for me, in reading the original myths, frost giant's never really been how I see him. Yes, as a giant, part giant, but not frost giant. So that was like a little thing that niggled at me, but that's just because I'm a Lokian. So Loki is kind of a big deal for me. So other than that, it was really great. I gave it 4.5 stars. And yeah, I'd definitely carry on reading. Next up, another NetGalley run again, The Silence of the Girls by Pat Barker. And this is another 4.5 star read for me. This is another of the Greek retellings. There's been a big flurry of Greek myth retellings of late, particularly Greek myth retellings from the point of view of women, which is what this one is. And this story is told from the point of view of a noblewoman who is captured and given as a prize to Achilles in the middle of the Trojan War. So she basically sees the end of the war from pretty much just before the death of Hector up until the victory. I thought it was a really good piece of characterization, an interesting new take on Achilles, who's not really the hero in this piece. Excuse me. Yeah, I mean, all up, if you're a fan of these Greek myth retellings, it's definitely one you're going to want to check out. And I enjoyed it, as I said, 4.5 stars. I don't have anything really major to say about it. It was enjoyable. It's probably not one I'd reread again and again, but I'm glad I read it once. And I thought it was an interesting take. So, moving on, another NetGalley one, A Touch of Magic by Isabelle Adler. And this one's another 4.5 stars. We had a little flurry of them, haven't we, for a minute there. And this is another LGBT story. I really loved it. I thought it was great fun. Essentially we have Carrie, who is a stage musician who has an amulet, and Tyre is a thief who has been hired to steal it from him. Only the amulet is somewhat different than how both of them believe, and along the way they encounter mob violence, so the mobs are trying to get hold of it, plus interference from another person who's also keen to get his hands on this amulet. And of course, during the course of this, there's a little bit of love and romance between Carrie and Tyre. It was good characters, very likeable characters, fun plot, nicely paced, and again, it's the first of a series, and I'd definitely be willing to carry on and read more about these characters in future books. And we're sticking with NetGalley for a minute with The Isle of Gold by Seven Jane. This is a 4-star read for me. Now this is essentially a pirate story that's historical fantasy, I kind of want to call it. It starts out as an overly historical piece. There's Merrin, who is the young girl who decides to disguise herself as a boy and gets a job on the pirate ship because she wants to go off in search of the family she's never known. However, along the way, we suddenly move into the realm of fantasy. There are sea goddesses and gods and a hidden island. I liked it. It had plenty of good points. There were a few pacing issues. Once or twice the action kind of lagged a bit, and it did feel like the opening was really, really slow, and then suddenly there's this spurt of activity with so much happening at the end in just the space of a few chapters. I also, although I liked Merrin as a character, I was actually really more interested in Captain Winters, with whom she was sailing. I thought he was a much more interesting figure, and I would have liked in some ways to see a bit more about him. But overall, 4 stars, still a really entertaining read, and if you like historical with a bit of fantasy and you like a few pirates thrown in, it's kind of, in some ways it's a bit of a Pirates of the Caribbean kind of deal. You've got this sort of historical pirate story, but with all these fantastic sea creatures and the like going on. So if that's your thing, check it out. Next up is a book that I received, not by NetGalley, but from the publisher in exchange for a review, and it is The Tyre by C.J. Dubois and E.C. Huntley. This is a book that was originally published in French and has now been translated into English. Essentially, there's a young guy, or a man in India. He's got a family, he's got a son who's just gone off to work for the first time in a different town. He's got a daughter who's at school, beautiful wife, but he's living hand to mouth. Essentially, he collects rubbish from the side of the road and scrapes by. But then one day he sees a new tyre bounce off a truck, and no one comes back for it, so he's got this tyre which should be worth what to him is a huge sum of money. And the novel progresses as he's desperately trying to sell this tyre, and there are sort of a wave of good fortune follows the discovery, followed by an equal sudden drop as some terrible things start to happen. I think it was brilliant. I really enjoyed it. It's my final 5-star read for the year, or for the month. I haven't read that many books yet, for the month at least. It's a really thoughtful piece. It's only fairly short, a couple of 100 pages. It kept me keen to read more all the way through. I mean, I read it over 2 nights, and at the end of that first night it was a struggle to make myself say I've got to go to bed now. I did want to keep reading. Really great characters, really great story, and as I said, very thought-provoking on ideas of what brings happiness in life and what do we need for happiness, and sometimes how things that seem fortunate can actually lead to misery. So definitely worth checking out if you're into literary fiction with a lot of fun but a bit of a meaning behind it as well. And that brings me to the last book for the month, which is The Edge of Hope, Bad Blood Book 1 by Alina Popescu. And this is one I picked up for free on Kobo. And for me, this was a 3.5-star read. It's a paranormal romance / urban fantasy, depending on how you decide to categorise it. We have our young heroine, Alexa, who is writing a vampire novel, and a journalist wants to interview her about it, but one thing leads to another, and we discover that vampires do really exist, and that she's trod a little too close to the truth with the book she's intending to write. I don't want to say too much to give away the story, but of course there's a bad vampire, there's some slightly less morally dubious vampires, and there's a few kidnappings going on in the background that they need to solve. Overall, I really liked the plot idea. It has a slightly different origin story for vampires than I've seen done by anyone else. That was an absolute plus. I liked the characters, as I said, I liked the premise. The only thing that for me stopped me giving this book a 4-star was there was a little bit of repetition at times with information. For example, Alexa tells her backstory to 3 different characters during the course of the novel, but as a reader I didn't need to hear it 3 times. So I just feel there was a few bits there where things could have been tightened up a little bit, but overall it was still a good story. It finished on an epic cliffhanger, and certainly it left me thinking that I want to find out what happens next. So it was a good paranormal romance, not one that I absolutely gush about, but I did still really enjoy it. So that's it for May. I will be back at the end of June with another vlog telling you all about what books I've been reading over what will be the coming 4 weeks or so. In the meantime, I'll have plenty of other content for you here on my channel. So if you liked the video, if you enjoy watching my little vlogs here, please do subscribe. Tick that little bell so you get the notifications from YouTube as well. And I look forward to talking to you again very soon. Bye for now, everyone.